Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Josh. Is
Hi,
this
how are you?
the good? Thank you. Is this the first time joining the Ratify community call?
Yeah, my first time. I
Oh,
can't remember, did
welcome.
it select? Yeah. There we go. Right camera.
Yeah, I can see you now. Hi, I'm Susan. I'm one of the project maintainers on Ratify,
Oh, nice to meet you.
and I'm an engineer on the Azure Container Registry team.
Oh, very cool.
Nice
Nice
to
to meet
meet
you.
you.
Yeah, likewise.
Are you, Josh, what is your background, and are you looking to explore Ratify or?
Sure. So I'm a cloud advocate on the cloud native team at Microsoft, and so I've been working with Notary quite a bit, and so Ratify is kind of a natural extension to that. So I've dabbled with a little bit to kind of test out the different policies and stuff with Ratify. So yeah, just here to
Oh,
learn and absorb as much as I can.
cool. Do you have any specific questions for us today?
Oh, not really. Just trying to be a fly on the wall and just get a little bit more involved and engaged.
Oh, cool. Well, look forward to seeing you from time to time.
Sounds good.
Okay, let me share my screen. Cool. Can everyone see the screen?
Yep.
Thanks. So typically, Josh, we go through the open PRs in the beginning of the meeting, just to get a quick status update to see what's blocked. So the first PR on the list is add contribution ladder. Sajay, are you still actively working on that?
No, because Toddy is off for this week, so I'll probably get to it once he's back, and I probably need his review because he's doing all the governance work for multiple projects.
Got it. Okay, let us know if you need one of us to also review it.
Thanks.
And next one, Akash, I know you've been working with Binbin on reviewing the TLS Helm updates. Do you know the status on that?
Yeah, I think we agreed that we'd want to merge the PR. Before we can merge it though, there's some changes to the README, which are breaking changes. So if we merged it, then the current RC1 published chart wouldn't support the README changes. So I think that ties into the first discussion point for today's meeting. We can maybe come to some consensus on how we want to handle that change.
Yep, sounds good. Matt's PR, the schema validator test updates, is ready. I think I will ping him for a rebase, and then we'll be good to go. Certec added some keyless support for the cosine code path, but I think he's still working on it because the integration test is not yet passing, so that's blocking the merge. And I've granted him access to the test cosine image, so he can like push the test images that works with his latest changes. So he's still working on that. The removing the notary certificate, I will work with Akash to fix the README as well. We'll talk about that in a second. And Binbin has a draft PR for adding end-to-end tests for AKV. But I think we're in an overall good shape for the open PRs. Anyone have any specific questions on the PRs before we move on? Okay, good. Okay, moving on to the agenda. Yeah, Akash, I'm going to use my PR as an example so we can talk about it. So one of the changes in my PR is to rename the notary certificate that's in the Helm chart. So it's a rename from Ratify Test Cert to Notary Cert. And in my PR, I've included the update to update the quick start step. But if I checked this in, this will update the Ratify get started instructions, but the Ratify published release is pointing to RC1. So the latest README step is not compatible with our latest release. So the question here is, how do we handle breaking changes that require a change to README? Akash, is there anything to add?
No, I think you were, that's the issue. I think we were discussing that we would maybe separate the README from the published documentation. But how we would do that, what the timeline would look like, I think that's still up in the air.
Yeah, Akash and I was also looking at like, how does other projects do it? So we're wondering if anyone knows in this group, like, for example, the secret store driver, how do they manage their documentation? Like, is this a GitHub page or a separate web page that they maintain? Does anyone on the call have any suggestions or information to share? Sajay, you're on mute. Oh.
Yeah, I don't have any suggestion. I'm still wondering, like, what's the actual challenge here in keeping the docs with the repository, and main keeps updating as needed. Maybe I'm not following the question here. That's why.
Oh, so the so we want the quick start. Our goal is to have the quick start step pinned to a specific release. And currently the challenge is, like, once we have breaking changes in main, the step no longer work with the latest release. And we're observing a pattern here, like most of the projects that we've reviewed, like Auras and Secret Store CSI Driver, they all have a website for their doc. So we're wondering if we should follow the same pattern.
It comes with an overhead also to maintain that website. I think you have a tag, and the expectation would be to use tree/tag/ and you should get to the specific README that's a part of the release. I don't see it as a concern. Like, if you wanted to update just that specific release, you could have the branch from which the release was made and then keep that as a way to make things forward. So if you go to the README, or like you switch the branch, you should see exactly what you released. At least that's my take. And the quick start can always use that as a baseline.
I see.
So do we need to add a disclaimer that calls that out, or is that just something that everyone, because I'm sure someone's going to trip over that.
Right. Helm had this problem because Helm 3 was very different from Helm 2 and Helm. But Helm has a very dedicated, very rich documentation site also that they maintain. So.
So Sajid, back to your suggestion, so by default, this points to whatever is in the main branch, is it?
Yeah, I mean, you can branch and you'll get the different views there. Just try switching to a branch on top, and then you'll be able to see the README for that specific tag if you want to, or a specific release. Now the question is,
I see. Can we default to the latest release? Is there a way to configure?
You have to change the default branch. That would be that will change a lot of behavior.
Yeah, people won't be looking at the latest.
Yeah, when you clone, it'll actually change stuff.
Yep.
Or maybe
Okay.
have a pointer in the README to point to the previous release if needed, right? Like to release
Yeah.
or might not be a necessity, but at least to the previous release. And if you're using RC1, follow this and then have a link to that. Or if you're using RC2, follow this and have a link to that. That might be something that we can update in main quickly without any, there's no friction to getting that update in.
Yep. Yep. Okay. I think that is a good workaround for now.
Before we do a release, we cut a branch, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you can just point to the branch, and if there is a patch to the README in that branch, you can still keep updating the README. And that way you don't have to worry about the main README also.
Yep. Yep. I'm good with that. Any other feedback on this?
Just to be clear, that the only time that we do cut a branch is for a release, right? The actual work up until the time that we cut a milestone branch for that release, that's all done on main. So we could possibly see this with other artifacts.
That's kind of what I assume. I mean, the only time we probably needed another branch I've seen is in, I think when we did drafts for certain spec or like in auras and notation when we wanted to kind of do like a part implementation, but main is typically where you want everything to go. So I would say that main by default, and until everybody on the community agrees, we're going to work on this branch and form an official, because you'll have to have branch rules, gates and all that on a new branch. So
No, I don't think we need to do that anytime soon. Maybe it becomes something that we need to do experience-wise after the first GA release, but I don't see it as a requirement now. As long as we are documenting that approach somewhere, which I thought we already were.
that everything goes.
Jimmy, is this the document you
yeah,
have in mind?
That's what I thought. Yeah, I thought if it's not there, then we probably need to get it in there, I guess.
Yeah, we've been following pretty much the release process from the doc. Except last time when we did RC, like we did cut a branch closer to release date, and then for stabilization purposes, we did port some commits from the main branch to the RC branch.
Okay.
Cool. Next on the agenda, Akash has been looking at the auth support for the cosign plugin. Akash, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. If you could just click on the link, I'll give a brief summary on some of the findings and implementation efforts. So basically, I've been looking at filling some of the gaps that we have with the cosign support in Ratify. We ran into a bunch of problems after RC1, where because of the way cosign is enabled, we were running into it failing the whole verification process because cosign couldn't support the private registries. So this is an effort to support private registry authentication with cosign, and then also rework a little bit of the actual core verifier so that it aligns more closely to the Ratify abstraction barriers. So currently, the way cosign is implemented is it's kind of a special cased verifier, and for some historical context, that was because the way we've set up the way the store, which stores all the artifacts, versus the verifier, which does a verification, it accepts a certain type from an OCI artifact type and passes that on to the verifier. And there was some dependency there. And the way we find the artifacts via using the refers API was not exactly supported with cosign before. So we had to do this special case scenario in the actual Aura store where we would do an existence check using the Crane as the Crane library to see if the cosign specific tagged manifest existed in the repository. If it did, then we could kind of massage it into a form that was added to our list of refers that we would loop through to verify each of those artifacts and call the appropriate verifier in each case. So the second part of the verification process is the actual cosign plugin verifier, which is implemented as an external verifier. And in that, we would actually use an online verification process exposed through the cosign APIs. And that was primarily because of how the cosign signature was stored in the registry. It's stored as a regular image versus as an OCI artifact. So there wasn't much in terms of what's exposed in the API originally, where you could do an offline version where we could leverage the Aura store to pass in the manifest and blob content, and then cosign could do the offline verification. So those were the two main problems with cosign. Now, kind of the goal was to enable private registry, and then the second goal is to remove this extra existence check that currently happens in the Aura store. So those are the two phases of it. So the first stage will be to support the auth-enabled registries, and this will be to just unblock the current flow where we only support public registry support if you enable cosign. And then the second will be to actually remove any special casing in the Aura store so that we don't have to deal with any user error or any extra casing for cosign scenarios. It can just be how other verifiers are treated, where if you are in a Kubernetes scenario, you can just apply the extra verifier CRD and things will just work. So in order to implement the first part, which is the auth-enabled registries, we'll be switching, instead of having the Aura store use Crane to actually check the existence of the cosign manifest, we'll be using Auras. Auras can do the same functionality. And the hope is that when we switch to Auras, we actually get the auth for free, because we already have all that wired up to use credentials and the credential cache for the Aura store. And then the second step is in the actual external provider, external verifier implementation. There's been new APIs that cosign has exposed, which allow for an offline verification scenario using the blobs that you can download using the Aura store. So we would rewrite the entire verifier to use this offline scenario. So no longer are we required to do an online verification process in the verifier itself, which means we don't have to worry about the auth credentials flowing down to the verifier itself. So that's a big win in that scenario. And then the other win is that that more closely aligns to how all the other verifiers work. So that's the current plan to enable auth supported registries. Once we do that, we should be able to support cosign in any of the supported registries, including the Auras distribution registry, which is the local registry, as well as an ACR or any other OCI 1.1 compliant registries. The other consideration which has popped up in my discovery of these new APIs is that cosign has actually recently added support for the new OCI 1.1 method of storing signatures, which will allow us to remove the initial existence check, which is the special manifest tag lookup operation that currently happens in the Aura store. That is in experimental mode. It just hit main branch last week. So I think in the meantime, we have to continue supporting this existence check, but in the future, we could probably migrate over to that. And depending on what we decide, we could only support cosign signatures that follow the new 1.1 way of signing. Yeah, so that's in a nutshell what I've been looking into. I think I've actually started prototyping it out, and looks like we can finish at least the first goal, which is to enable the private registries with cosign verification. I haven't tried out with the new OCI 1.1 support, but I'll look into that next. Yeah, so any questions?
So, and this is a little off topic, but with private registries, Sigstore would still be using public record registry, or is that how that works?
Yeah, so currently what we do is we just have it piped up, so the public key that is manually supported, that is provided to Ratify, is what we use in the verification process. We don't use any of the public Recore or I think it's full CO support.
Mhm.
That's an extra effort that is going on in another PR. But yeah, ideally, once we have that extra Recore and full CO support, we'd also be able to support that scenario.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you, just to be clear, you also said that there's an experimental feature from them that supports OCI 1.1.
Yes, so instead of them pushing the signature manifest as like a special, they have a special tag-based schema which they use to
Yeah.
denote which image it's attached to. They now can push the actual image as a regular image with the subject fields filled out to be the point to the image that it's attached to.
Okay.
One thing to note is that they don't support the OCI artifact. They support the image descriptor, which has been updated to add the subject field. So I think we have to start thinking about how we would support both types, because currently we rely upon the OCI artifact manifest type, and we don't exactly support the image manifest type. In order to get around this, I've kind of massaged the data that comes from an image manifest into an OCI artifact. So we take the layers and reassign them into blobs. But I think in the future, if other verifiers are going to be using the image manifest too, we should have some way to support both. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is there any concern to reprioritize the anonymous cosign and then do the private registries?
Sorry, anonymous cosign as in?
Like, can we switch the order of the enable private registry as a follow-up once the cosign flag? So right now, cosign works with anonymous registries?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so it's only to support private registry cosign that we need to do this, right?
Yes.
Okay, so, and what does removing the cosign enable flag mean?
That means that we won't be able to support the old non-experimental way for cosign. So the current way cosign stores signatures, because that flag is needed so that we can turn on that existence check. We can by default add the existence check. So every time it does it makes an extra call out to registry, but that's an extra overhead performance-wise. So yeah, that's the other consideration. We could also do an opt-in flag or opt-out flag, where instead of where we have require you to enable it, we can require you to disable that check instead. So in those specific scenarios where you're only using the notation verifier, then you can just disable it, and then you're not having to deal with that extra existence check in the store.
Yeah, the cosign enabled flag is there on the RS store configuration today. So then this RS store doesn't have to know if the cosign verifier is enabled.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that's what the thing I was missing. So the flag is on the store, not on the verifier. Okay.
Yep.
I don't have any other questions.
Cool. Thanks for running us through that, Akash. And that's all we have on the agenda today. Anything else anyone want to discuss? Anything, Jimmy, that you would like to discuss?
So I've been working internally on on a solution that's, I hope to have it wrapped up by the end of this week. And then I'm going to dive into what's going on with the OCI loading of plugins. I need to get my head around that more. So I'll probably be reaching out as I start to dive deeper into that. But other than that, no, I don't really have anything. Well, other than like some of the outstanding issues and like replacing the Gorilla Mux. And I had a question about logging. I mean, maybe I misunderstood the issue that was out there about logging, but are we looking to replace logging? Are we looking to fix logging? I didn't get my head around that one issue out there about logging.
Yeah, is that the one where so Xinghe had a question about why our CRD controller log looked different to our verifier logs. And
Okay.
then, so they're a completely different format because they're using different log library. And there was some discussion before where Noel said, oh, the manager looks like it was tied to log R. And then Noel was able
Okay,
to submit a PR to implement a sync. So now we're kind of unifying the log formatting so they don't kind of look out of place.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so that's what that one was about.
Okay. So yeah, I will probably then just look at the issue with replacing the Gorilla Mux, going back to like default net HTTP stuff, which I've been testing out locally. So I think it'll work.
Cool. Okay, anything else, anyone? All right, it's kind of a quiet week. Maybe it's school holidays or something. Yeah, thanks for joining, everyone. Oh, and I will be off next week. My son's daycare is mid-winter breaking next week. So Akash, are you happy to run the meeting?
Yep. Looks like you'll be stuck with me, everyone.
I'll be off next week. So
Yeah, make sure you have a long agenda.
Yes.
you can get a lot of things done if nobody's there. No, just kidding.
No, I don't want a long agenda next week. I want Akash to have a lot of free time. I'm going to be pinging him.
That works too. We'll keep you busy, Akash.
Yes.
All right. Take care, everyone. See you next time.
See you. Thanks.
Thank you.